Hey everybody, tonight we're debating whether or not there is reliable evidence for God, and we are starting right now. Ladies and gentlemen, thrilled to have you here for another epic debate. This is going to be a fun one, folks, and want to let you know if it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, I'm your host, James Coons, and we are a neutral platform hosting debates on science, religion, and politics. And we want to be sure that everybody, no matter what walk of life they're from, gets to make their case on a level playing field. And want to let you know as well, no matter what walk of life you're from, we hope you feel welcome. So thanks for being here with us. It's going to be a lot of fun. And if you happen to be kind of sick in the head, like us, you like juicy, controversial debates, well, have to let you know, consider hitting that subscribe button below, as we have many more debates to come. So for example, you'll see at the bottom right of your screen, we are very excited as we will be having Matt Dillahunty partnering with Dr. Josh this Friday night, and that is going to be against the real-life father-son duo, Cliff and Stuart Nettle. And so that is going to be a really fun one on the topic of biblical slavery. So with that, really excited to have you here, folks. Want to let you know for tonight's format, it's going to be pretty easy going. So it's going to be roughly 12 to 15 minutes from each side, and that's flexible, followed by about 50 to 60 minutes of open conversation, and then about roughly half hour of Q&A. So if you happen to have a question, feel free to fire it into the old live chat. And if you tag me with Modern Day Debate, it makes it easier for me to get every question in that list. With that, stoked to have our guests here. We are thrilled to have these guys. These are very experienced debaters, and we'll start with Randolf, who is the president of Canadian Atheists, and he's been here, you could say, a veteran debater. He is linked in the description, so you can hear plenty more where you hear, or from what you hear tonight. And I want to ask Randolf, thrilled to have you here. What can people expect to find at your link in the description?
James, it's always a pleasure to be here. I really enjoy the way you host these debates, and it's always a lot of fun. People can find out more about the organization I run, the Canadian Atheists, at www.canadianatheists.ca. You can also find me on my YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/Randolf Richardson. And remember, that's Randolph that's spelled with a letter F instead of a PH. And one more link I'll give you is for an upcoming program that myself and a friend of mine named Neil the 604 Atheist will be hosting a live atheism call-in program where we'll cover topics of pretty much anything except for politics, because we want to have a good time. And politics aren't always that enjoyable. So that one you can find out more about at www.truenorthtalk.ca. It's probably a couple months away before we'll actually be able to get to a point where we'll be able to start that program. But we are looking forward to that. Thank you very much, James. And thank you in advance to Ben. I'm looking forward to this.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all ours, Randolph, and thrilled to have another seasoned veteran debater. He's debated people such as Matt Dillahunty, and he himself has his own ministry, and we're thrilled to have you here, Ben. He is linked in the description, folks. So, Ben, if you'd be willing to share, what can people expect to find at your link? And thanks again for being here.
Yes, thanks so much for having me on the program this evening. So the ministry that I run is just simply called Ben Fischer Ministries. And among other things, I'm part of the adjunct faculty for Teen Challenge Leadership Institute here in the cities, which is a Bible school one-year program for preparing individuals coming out of chemical dependency for the full-time ministry. So that's one of the things I do, where I teach New Testament and apologetics. And then as well, I run a web-based ministry called Ben Fischer Ministries, as I noted, that has a variety of resources on a plethora of scholarly issues related to evidence for the faith. And so if you would like to become part of our online community, you can do so by requesting membership at the website, or else looking us up on Facebook at Ben Fischer Ministries. So thanks so much for coming on the program, and I'm certainly looking forward to having a spirited discussion with Randolph, and looking forward to what kinds of discussion we might have tonight.
You got it. So thank you very much, Ben, as well. And with that, Ben is going to get the ball rolling with his opening statement. And so thanks so much. Ben, I've got the clock set for you. The floor is all yours.
Well, thanks so much again, James. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to come on to your program this evening. And special thanks to the whole gang at Modern Day Debate for folding me into their schedule, as well as special thanks to Randolph for being part of tonight's discussion. I'm certainly looking forward to a wonderful exchange of ideas as we discuss the question, is there reliable evidence for God? Now, in my opening statement, I'm going to be making the argument that there really are a few good arguments for God's existence. And so we'll discuss our way through how it is that we come upon those sorts of insights and explain what some of those evidences might be. So as we do, we'll just go ahead and jump in by engaging with some ideas that have been around for quite some time, the idea of skepticism and the such like, and we'll work our way eventually towards the question of whether or not there really is good evidence for God. So let's begin. Now, skepticism has probably been the dominant approach to engaging in religious discussion for over 20 centuries. And yet, from what we have seen in the past several decades, the kinds of views offered in defense of it have been, as some say, challenged. So therefore, a relevant question for tonight is, what is the proper basis and foundation for knowledge of any kind? Perhaps the most exhaustive approach to answering that question was undertaken by the early Greek thinker Sextus Empiricus. And so therefore, it will be useful for us to spend some time in our discussion examining his arguments carefully. So let's jump in. Now, Sextus Empiricus was an early critic of Plato's teaching. He lived and wrote in roughly the mid-2nd century, and Sextus thought that there were three main challenges to grounding our knowledge of any proposition. The first one we'll discuss is called the problem of the infinite regress. Essentially, the problem of the infinite regress is a difficulty which naturally arises due to the skeptic's demand that everything must be proven by something other than itself. In other words, justifiable proofs are demanded for everything without limitation. So therefore, the need to search for proof is never fully satisfied. Now, of course, this sort of demand seemed extravagant to some, a point which eventually gave rise to more conservative and rational philosophical positions within the Western tradition, because, as the ancient Greeks quickly recognized, if everything must be proven, then nothing can. Now, to see why this is so, think about the question, does God exist? How do we go about answering it? Well, we might suppose that the way to settle a question like this is by using something called the rule of independence. And the rule of independence essentially says that in the case of any pair of contingent propositions, i.e. any propositions which await our conferring evidence upon it, what we need to do is to defend the proposition by using something other than the proposition itself. Of course, keep in mind that skepticism essentially held that it was a sheer given that all propositions invariably are contingent. So based on that assumption, we reason forward in our inquiry as follows. Contingent proposition A is proven by contingent proposition B. Contingent proposition B is proven by contingent proposition C. Contingent proposition C is proven by proposition D, and so on and so forth until we reach proposition Z. The problem, however, is that once we reach proposition Z, we are now faced with a very serious question. How precisely do we determine the status of Z? Well, traditionally, the argument of infinitism is held that we show Z is proven by making it contingent upon, call it, proposition A prime. So, contingent proposition A prime is proven by contingent proposition B prime. Contingent proposition B prime is proven by contingent proposition C prime. Then C prime is proven by D prime, and so on and so forth, until once again we reach proposition Z prime. But once again, we are now faced with the same question as before. How do we show that Z prime is no longer contingent? Well, infinitism predictably holds that we simply continue our string of proofs by arguing that Z prime or Z1 is now contingent upon A2. So contingent proposition A2 is proven by contingent proposition B2, so on and so forth, ad infinitum. Thus, the problem we're seeing here is that there seems to be no proper stopping mechanism for the inquiry. The string of proof just continues onward forever. And this means that we are essentially saying that our initial contingent proposition, call it A, was eternally contingent, which means that it can never be proven. And that is obviously a major problem because it raises some significant questions about the overall universal foundations for human knowledge. And so with the absurdity of the first problem firmly settled in our minds, where do we turn next? Well, Sextus's answer is that we must now move on to door number 2. Thus, the second possibility which Sextus explored was the argument of coherentism. Here, Sextus suggests that perhaps we should have responded differently to the previous challenge when we reach contingent proposition Z. So rather than making Z contingent upon A prime, we should have argued that Z was contingent upon some previous member of the original set of proofs. And so in that case, we might have responded by saying something like this: contingent proposition B, or Z rather, is proven by Y. However, this really does seem to be unacceptable. The reason is it has all the appearances of radically adjusting the overall goal of the inquiry, because the inquirer is now being offered something called a circular answer. Z is proven by Y. In other words, we're simply circling back to the previous proposition in the original set of proofs. And of course, this immediately raised the additional question: how is that really different from claiming that Z is contingent upon A? Well, to this, Sextus replies that what we are discussing here is whether coherency rather than independence is to be favored whenever settling a matter as closed to further inquiry. In other words, what we were asking is whether the fact that the list of proofs coheres well with one another forms a better conclusion to our inquiry than the idea that nothing can be proven. But this ultimately seemed to be unsatisfying to some as well, for how does this show that we have now identified a proper basis for closing knowledge to further question? And so, as a result, our inquiry has thus far seemed to prove that all philosophical systems are just doomed to be based upon flimsy, tottering, self-defeating arguments. Because as we are now seeing in the case of coherentism, a theory becomes the proof of the argument, and without a proper footing, it simply folds like a house of cards. So where does that leave us? Well, Sextus concluded that it left us really with only one viable option, an agreed-upon foundation. Thus, the third and final trope in Sextus's argument is an agreed-upon foundation. In other words, we must agree to some sort of acceptable foundation upon which we rest our final arguments and our final conclusions. Mind you, these would be things that we deliberately choose not to question, because without settling upon some kind of premise which we exempt from all proofing, we cannot escape from the dilemma caused by the first two arguments, allegedly. At this point, we should probably note how troubling this is for some skeptical people, because we are essentially suggesting that maybe we should have responded by claiming that proposition Z wasn't contingent upon anything. In other words, maybe we should have simply responded by saying that proposition Z does not need to be proven. So in the event that that sort of an answer is unacceptable, as in fact it was to Sextus, how would our inquiry conclude? Well, in answer, Sextus surmised that our investigation has really left us with no ability to properly ground anything. In other words, it shows us that it is baseless for us to say that we can know something, as well as it is baseless for it to say that we can know nothing. But there are several good reasons for thinking that Sextus had really reached the wrong conclusion in his argument. So, to wrap up our discussion of Sextus's work, let's examine the two major approaches that foundationalism has historically taken to grounding our knowledge of any true proposition. Hence, foundationalism has traditionally taken on two characteristically distinct forms. That is, historically, it is either argued that one, we must presuppose that Z doesn't need to be proven, or two, that we must demonstrate that Z may be axiomatically proven. Of course, the difference between a presupposition and an axiom is that a presupposition is merely blindly assumed, while an axiom is self-evidently true. In other words, an axiom proves itself to be true by virtue of being something which we are never justified in questioning. Take, for example, this argument. Is it not axiomatically certain that there are only three ways to settle the contingent status of Z? That is, we can either argue that Z is proven by A prime, Y, or Z itself. Notice that there are no options for us to choose from other than this, beyond our pointing out that in the case of the second option, it becomes just as valid for us to say that Z is proven by Y as it is to say that Z is proven by A. And so an axiom is therefore, properly speaking, a self-evident irreducible prime. It's something which, upon inspection, must necessarily be true and cannot be false. But this also means that no independent proof can be reasonably demanded of an axiom, since to do so would be practically tantamount to denying the status of the thing under question. So now that we've seen that axioms are necessarily true, we arguably have discovered contra sextus that we really do have a philosophically acceptable basis for grounding religious knowledge. That is, provided that our proposition is established on some sort of axiom, whatever logically follows from that proposition is equally as certain as the proposition itself. Of course, if this is true, and it hardly seems that it could be false, we would now be in a position to do precisely what the skeptic has denied. In other words, we would now be able to rationally ground religious knowledge, which would lead us to a welcome response to the various skeptical arguments we might explore. So with these things in mind, let's now return to the main question for tonight. Is there good evidence for God? Given what we have shown, what argument might we use to show that God's existence may be axiomatically established? Well, consider the closing argument as one good possibility. Let's start by imagining, for the sake of argument, that we are all just brains in vats. As this is the common classical skeptical argument, we'll just start here. Now, an evil mad scientist has cleverly wired your cerebrum and is now controlling your every sensory experience. Would it perhaps surprise you that you could still deduce, even in those dire straits, that God exists? In fact, the argument is virtually irrefutable. Come what may, the divine conclusion persists. The case here, however, will ultimately hinge upon our prior discussion, since the key to the whole windup becomes connected to our view of math. Because it's alleged that it's self-evidently true that whether we are awake in the real world or asleep in the matrix, 2 + 3 always equals 5. Now, from what we know of math, it's flatly impossible for mathematical truths like that to somehow wind up being false. And so thus we can safely conclude that the rules of math are axiomatic, even if it turns out that we are just sleeping in the matrix. Now, this in turn prepares us to answer the skeptic's challenge because it leaves the proponent of atheism without a founded case. Because if math is truly trustworthy, as we've in fact argued that it is, then time in the matrix must be finite and not beginningless. As noted philosopher of time, Professor William Lane Craig has argued, if the past were beginningless, then the present could not have occurred. But surely that's absurd. We would therefore have to conclude that the matrix world itself must necessarily have a beginning. Now, to explore this point a bit further, consider the following illustration. I refer to it tonight as the ever-pending birthday. Imagine that you've walked into a room only to encounter an infinite row of tumbling dominoes. Each falling tile collapses a subsequent member, causing the preceding domino to plummet toward the earth. And each successive domino takes all of 1 second to accomplish its inevitable collision with the floor. And now just imagine that the row of dominoes is utterly beginningless, leading to a final domino standing near your foot. Bending down, you notice that the domino bears an inscription which reads the exact date of your birth. You then begin to wonder, if the set of dominoes is infinitely long, how much time will it take for my birthday domino to collapse? Well, the answer is unavoidable. Your tile would never fall. Consequently, this would imply that you could never be born. And so for this reason, the matrix world in closing cannot be eternal. Some initial trigger had to set the world in motion. Because since a brain could not be invented if its person were never born, some inaugural set of affairs is necessary for us to create the proper story. Moreover, the initial cause would have to exist eternally, since any finite cause would itself require some causal parent. And from this point, only one additional proof is needed to show that God is indeed Lord of the matrix. Thus, our final query is truly the capstone for the case. If the causes triggered the other causes, then what is the founding reason? Well, if we say that the reason is something which lies outside of the cause itself, then it, and not the cause, is the real reason why the matrix world exists. Thus, the parent cause of the world necessarily causes itself to cause the other causes to be set in motion. And this doubtlessly implies a conscious will at work in the creation of any world that we might imagine to exist. From here, refuting atheism becomes very simple, since our case for God's existence surely applies to life outside the vat, because no matter the world the skeptic imagines, God would be the cause, which means that God exists in every possible world that we conceive of. Therefore, since it is not possible to conceptually erase God, the force of skeptical doubts are effectively neutralized. Nothing seems to be gained by them, since God's existence is axiomatic, a point which would seem to imply that God cannot fail to exist. And so since God's existence can be grounded axiomatically, we have the firmest sort of proof for God's existence. And so I now hand the mic back to our moderator and back to Randolph.
Thank you very much, Ben Fischer. Thrilled for that opening statement. We will kick it over to Randolph. Thanks so much for being here as well, Randolph. The floor is all yours.
Well, thank you very much. That was a very interesting set of perspectives. I'm not, they're kind of new to me, this idea. But first of all, one thing that really stood out to me was the idea of imagining that we are all just brains in vats. And to that, I would have to say, of course we are. If you can all bear with me for a sec, I can prove this. Put your hands on your head, and I'll explain. What you are holding now is essentially a vat. Your brain is in your skull, which qualifies as a vat. All kidding aside, reality is, as far as I can discern, real. This is what I have to live with, what I have to work with, unless my interlocutor here can show me how to leave the matrix. So I'm just going to go through a couple of things here because it seems that there's an attempt to try to cast doubt on skepticism, which I have no problem with. Skepticism, as I understand it, is a suspension of judgment. And I see that as an opportunity to put critical thinking through its paces. So we can apply critical thinking to the different ideas that are being presented. We don't actually have to take a position on something. That is true skepticism and we try to do that in a non-biased way. So critical thinking is an essential part of this. It is both, and it's important to understand this, that critical thinking is both skill-based and attitude-based. So we have the skill of applying logic, of testing evidence, and different things like that. But the attitude is also very important for considering the veracity of various claims and ideas. So an attitude example would be if somebody were to tell you something and you're immediately denying it or immediately agreeing with it. That is not necessarily critical thinking because a better approach to critical thinking, I believe, is considering the idea that's being presented and say, oh, really, let's find out more. Maybe my own idea is in error. But this is a very hard thing for people to do. And most of us all the time, with all kinds of little things we take for granted and assume because it's necessary to function in life. So we tend to reserve critical thinking for the more major questions, such as the question in this debate. There is a need for evidence. And evidence is, of course, known very commonly as the available body of facts or information indicating whether belief or proposition is true or it's valid. And that's very important to have reliable evidence. So the difference between just regular evidence, which is somebody can say they saw something, we want reliable evidence so we'll know that what the person saw actually is what they saw, and they weren't seeing an illusion or something. Ben mentions axioms, and he compares them with presuppositions. So a presupposition is very often viewed as a blind assumption, while an axiom is considered to be something like an assumption that is self-evidently true and just normally accepted. It is a statement of propositions regarded as being established, accepted, or self-evidently true. But it's very important to remember that critical thinking still applies. Even if something that we recognize as a fact, later on we can turn up new evidence, we can discount that fact. This happened in our history where people used to think the world was flat until new evidence came about, and suddenly it's different. Now it's a different landscape, and now it's challenging ideas. And those who strive to be proper skeptics or at least really good with critical thinking, both attitude-based and skill-based, will have an open approach to considering this new idea and trying to test the ideas out in their own way, and if they have the capability to do that. So when it comes to evidence, so evidence for a deity, I want reliable evidence. And for me, I need something that will, without any question to me, prove to me that the deity is real. So in the case of Christianity, which Ben is representing here, is the Christian view on this, as I understand. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Ben. The Christian deity, as I understand it, has a number of characteristics, and at least two of them are: omnipotence, which makes the deity all-powerful, and omniscience, which makes the deity all-knowing. So while I regard those as a paradox, and I see that as already a failing for the whole idea itself, because, for example, the deity knows with its omniscience that, say, tomorrow we're going to have rainfall in our city, but uses his omniscience the next day to change that so that it's not rainfall, but instead we get sunshine or we get snow or something. By taking that action and making that change and exercising his omnipotence, he has now invalidated what he knew the day before. And therein lies the paradox. And that makes it a problem. The other thing that I would like to know, if I would like to have this deity to prove to me, if it's possible, and this is what I would accept as evidence, is if this deity could grant to me for a week or two, a week or a fortnight, omniscience or very close to it, and omnipotence or very close to it, so that I can go ahead and explore the universe, the whole cosmos perhaps, and run some experiments, maybe even bring some friends with me, and verify all of this for myself, because I would want to know for certain that this is real. And that's, I think, what it would take, because this deity has such super amazing characteristics. I would want to at least be able to test drive them, so to speak. So those are kind of where I'm at with those things. So I think that's probably, I guess, where we can go with this. One more thing is, when it comes to atheism, it's very common, I find, for a lot of theists to say atheism has to be proven true or disproven, proven false. And it's a common misunderstanding that I've encountered with debating with theists. Atheism is just a classification of not believing in deities. You answer the question, do you believe in deities? If the answer is not yes, then you're not agreeing with that. If you were to look at it as a proposition, you're an atheist. You just don't believe in deities. It is sometimes conflated with anti-theism, which is an opposing view to theism. And I do think that the anti-theistic point of view does carry a burden of proof just as much as the theistic one does. So to say that something does not exist, or to say that something that does exist, both carry that onus of justification or burden of proof. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you very much, Randolph. And we will kick it into open conversation, folks. So should be a lot of fun. And with that, the floor is all yours, gentlemen.
I'm sure you have some questions, Ben. Why don't you go ahead?
Yes. Oh, pardon me. I just kicked the microphone stand by accident. Well, good. I'm glad to have gotten the chance to hear a bit about your opening statement and hear just some of the thoughts that you have on our discussion, and just to have written down and scribbled out some points and questions, which...
Feel free to ask for clarification, because it's hard to keep up with the writing.
I'd love to ask for clarification on a couple of things.
Okay.
And also, if at any time during the discussion you would like to ask the same sorts of things of me, I'll do the best that I can to answer those as well, so that we can have some good back and forth discussion. You started out in your opening statement by speaking about brains in the vat. This is the example that I gave toward the end of my opening statement. Mm-hmm. And here is, I was just simply drawing upon the most extreme example in the case literature to show that we really can't have knowledge about a good many things, and therefore, how could we have certainty about something like the existence of God? If we can't even know whether or not our senses are reliable, then how on earth could we know about God's existence? And so that was merely the reason for the opening illustration. It could be something, of course, less extreme, I think, and that might be helpful rather than choosing the most extreme example. But the thing that makes that one so compelling is that it seems that if God's existence can be shown on some rational basis to be true in the matrix world, then perhaps there's a good reason to show that the same arguments extend to this world as well.
Well, except that the matrix is a story. And but I know you're talking about the concept, if that concept was actually the case. So we're dealing in hypotheticals here. So we need to somehow establish and agree that that actually is the case. I used a bit of humor. I attempted. I'm suspecting nobody laughed because I'm not the best at delivering humor with the brain.
Yeah.
You enjoyed it at least.
Sure. The philosophers typically. Go ahead.
Oh no, but then I got serious with that by talking about how what I experience in reality is the best that I know that I can do. And I understand that my perceptions can lead me astray, and I'm willing to accept that. So that's an important thing. So to say that we have 100% certainty on anything, I think, is very difficult. And this is why I say that an anti-theistic point of view carries a burden of proof as well, because they're going to have to prove unequivocally that there is absolutely no evidence for this deity anywhere. So but for you have an easier time of it because your deity apparently interacts with human beings on planet Earth. Am I correct?
Oh, certainly a Christian God definitely does. But the argument, to be fair, that I've offered tonight is just simply a description for how we know that an entity like God exists. And so this could really be applied to any sort of monotheistic God. It doesn't necessarily show that the God of Christianity exists. There we would be working with arguments that would perhaps go a bit farther afield from the question for tonight, which is there reliable evidence for God?
Well, that is the topic. So
that's the topic. And we may, perhaps you would think it would be fruitful for us to head that direction at some point tonight. But my opening statement anyway, just simply dealt with the debate challenge at hand. Yeah. And
when you
go ahead,
when you talk about that it could apply for any monotheistic God, I wonder a couple of things. Why not a monotheistic goddess? Does it have to be male? Another one would be, does it have to just be one? Why have you somehow ruled out that it could be multiple deities who all share the same omnipotence and omniscience and work together as a team to achieve the same aims as your preferred monotheistic God?
Yeah. And so here, in terms of the nature of God, this is related to something essentially which Christians would categorize as revelatory theology. That is, by revelation, Christians know that God is three persons in one essence. That this is not something that we could deduce on the basis of reason alone, but God himself would have to tell us. But properly speaking, it would be an admission, I think, on the part of atheism to say that there is a good argument to show that a female God exists, as well as there is a good argument to show that a male God exists, because it still leads to the conclusion God exists. And so
female would be a goddess, but I'm just quibbling.
Yeah, sort of a god or a goddess. But the atheist at that point seemed to be conceding the principal question under discussion.
They do say that Satan was the first to ask for equal rights. So I guess I'm following along with that.
Yeah, sure.
So,
yeah.
So, you're talking about knowing things for certain. I think what often happens is that there is a level of confidence that we can have in things, in ideas, in positions on things in life. Like, I can't say that I'm 100% certain on anything in life, but I can say that my confidence level is really, really close to 100% for many things. And actually, there is something I can say for certain. I can take this phone, for instance, this telephone, and I know that if I drop it, that gravity is going to take it downward, as it just did. And I just caught it so it didn't hit the floor and smash and break. More confidence I have. Now, of course, if I was to really get into it, I still can't say for certain I had 100% confidence there. There's a tiny, tiny, not impossible scenario that I couldn't rule out, such as a major earthquake struck at the moment that I was dropping the phone, and suddenly I'm dropping down and the phone stays where it is and goes up in the air, or something hits the planet, which I hope never happens. That's
sure.
level. But I can't rule out those possibilities, but now that it's happened, I can say with 100% certainty that I just dropped that telephone and the demonstration of gravity worked. So I think I've just provided you with an example that counters your claim that, or assertion that we can't know anything 100% for certain.
That we cannot know anything 100. I think that I made the claim that it's possible.
I've misunderstood you. I'm very sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, because in that case, I think that you and I would be in agreement. But I think that it's possible for us to have 100% certainty about something. But getting back to your question, your claim here that it's not possible for us to have 100% certainty or knowledge, if you will, of any given proposition.
Yeah.
This would be essentially the argument of Plato before the turn of, essentially Christ's birth and the turn of history. And so I think that it was Sextus Empiricus who challenged the notion that it's impossible to know anything, because that would itself seem to be a form of dogmatism. And so he used the various tropes that we went through in the opening discussion, that there are three ways to ground your knowledge of any true proposition. And one of them is that, you could use the rule of independence. A is proven by B, C, D, and onwards until you read Z. Once you read Z, what do you do? And so you could just simply iterate the proof backwards an infinite number of times, in which case the original proposition is never proven. Or you could go about by coherentism. Once you reach an acceptable grounding proposition, whatever you think that it is, or arbitrarily choose it to be, you just simply start by passing the warrant for the proof of, say, contingent proposition Z back to Y or some previous member of the set, or you settle upon a form of foundationalism. And Sextus's point there seemed to be that we don't know which ones of these that we should choose. And so therefore, to assert that we can't have knowledge is baseless, because these are the only three ways to reason.
So would it be fair to say that you don't have full confidence in the accuracy of the Bible then, or you do?
Well, now with regard to the accuracy of the Bible, my confidence there is going to be based on arguments such as, arguments for the resurrection of Jesus, who held that the Bible was indeed the Word of God. If that event can be shown to be true, then I think that we have good grounds for believing that God's Word indeed is precisely what it claims to be. But I wanted to ask you,
so where are you? Sorry,
a couple of.
I wanted to just quickly follow along with
Sure.
that for a moment, and then I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Sure.
Because it's on topic here. So it kind of sounds like you've got some hypothetical concerns there about the resurrection of Jesus from the way you just talked about it. Where are you in your level of confidence roughly on whether that is an accurate depiction then? Because my understanding of the Christian God is it's all from descriptions in the Bible.
Yes. And I think it's important here to recognize that the practicing historian, is not relying upon deductive arguments to fashion his conclusions. He's rather relying on inductive arguments, which would be appraisals of evidence and inference to the best explanation. And so there I'm as certain as I am about any historical event concerning the resurrection of Jesus, as certain as anyone could be. Now, I suppose that I could come up with some psychological reasons to entertain doubts, but they wouldn't be based upon reasons. And so therefore, they don't tend to fascinate me. And so for that reason, I don't find that I entertain much conjecturous thought on them, but I did.
So you hold a very high confidence, pretty close to 100%. Would that be fair?
I think I do. Yes.
Okay.
Concerning the resurrection of Jesus. Yeah.
So my understanding of the Bible is it's the inspired word of God. This is what's often told. So it's not actually God who wrote it. It's people who are inspired by what they perceived of God. And do you have a reason to consider those people who wrote that to be reliable?
Well, yes, I do, for a variety of reasons, but probably the most strong reason is that their predictions, many of them were fulfilled in a single person, namely the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. And so if that occurred, if they were right about that, I think that there are good reasons to say that everything that they said about their predictions was true, and everything that Jesus said about their predictions, that he construed them as reliable descriptions of what will take place in the future, that these are all going to happen as well. The resurrection of a dead man does tend to be an epistemic game changer, so to speak.
Okay, I think that's a fair answer. And I think it sounds like those are your reasons for believing what's written in the Bible. And those are your reasons. So when I've mentioned what my expectation is for some evidence, which is obviously very different from yours, but you have some questions for me, so go ahead.
Sure. Well, so one of the things that I think was an interesting idea is that you felt that we would really need to we would need to possess the attribute of omniscience to know whether or not God exists. And I wonder if that's really the case, given the argument that I walked out. If we can somehow conceptually erase a first mover, then perhaps, there are some good reasons to doubt what I've shown, because then in that case, God's existence couldn't be furnished on the basis of some axiom, couldn't be shown to be true on the basis of that. But since we do have that, and since that seems to be a necessary basis for knowledge, and axioms here would be things like A plus B is equal to B plus A. It would be things like logical, basically laws of logic, things like that, the law of contradiction, etc.
Okay, well, A plus B
is equal to B plus A. That's an axiom.
So if A is 1 and B is -2, do we end up with the same results?
Well, I think that what I've just said is important to recognize here. A plus B, not.
Oh, you're talking about compounding them. It doesn't matter the order of compounding them.
Correct. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. And that would be an example of an axiom, a mathematical axiom.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So, by the way, I really enjoy these kinds of things, and I hope others out there are enjoying the discussion as well. But the question I have is do we really need to have omniscience in order to establish that something is true? It seems to me, for example, that even if I didn't have a single operational instance of 1 + 1 = 2 anywhere in the universe, I could still be confident that the proposition 1 + 1 = 2 is true. Because it seems to me that me plus you equals 2, whether we're standing in heaven, on earth, or in hell. It doesn't really matter. So it seems like certain things are just true. And so if it turns out, for example, that it's axiomatically impossible to sort of conceptually erase a first cause out of any story, then that winds up showing us that we have a good reason for believing that first cause really does exist in this world.
Well, I think trivially, I can show you that 1 + 1 is equal to 2. I have 2 in my hand now. It's 2 USB memory sticks. These ones have Debian Linux and Ubuntu Linux on them, but I've got these things in my hands. I can count them. And so it's very trivial and easy and a common thing in life to demonstrate that. So this kind of axiom is very easy to accept because it's a very simple and straightforward kind of assumption that's being made based on things that we do in everyday life. We're picking up fruit from the store and we're easily adding them together. All kinds of things like that.
Yes.
When it comes to something else that we don't have direct access to, such as somebody claiming that there's a deity who can create entire galaxies, that's a much different claim that has a different level of sufficiency for proving it. And that's where it came to the point of, well, we don't have anything in our technology today. Star Trek, unfortunately, is not real. We can't travel around the universe and do all kinds of interesting things and have philosophical exercises with the alien species, which would be pretty awesome, I think, if we could. So
sure, I'm a big sci-fi fan. So.
Yeah. Hey, why not? Do you like the Orville?
Yeah.
That's one worth checking out if you're into that kind of thing. It's a lot of fun. The thing is, this is why I came up with this criteria for myself. Somebody was asking, what would it take atheists to believe in a deity? And so that was my answer. That's what it would take. I thought about it for a while and I thought, that's what it would take, because a lot of other things somebody could be fooled into that, but this would not be. This is something that I would be able to prove for myself. And the
So if you had omniscience, in other words.
Yeah. And so
you could test drive God's traits. Sure.
And some interesting objections came up. One of them was, you don't need that much time. They're trying to negotiate the time down. I thought that was hilarious. A lot of them said you'd only need it for a fraction of a second, or even a single Planck time unit is what some people were saying. But I said, no, this is my criteria. I want 1 week or 2 weeks, some short period of time like that. But nonetheless, and considering the universe is infinite, our time is infinite, what's 2 weeks? It should be nothing, almost like nothing in comparison to that. The other one objection that came up is, how can we trust you not to use that omnipotence against God? So I said, okay, I'm willing to have a condition imposed on that I can't do anything to God and can't interfere with his plans. So that seemed to end the conversation. I didn't get a reply after that. But the point I'm trying to make is that I'm going forward with a very genuine kind of criteria here, because I think that this would be something that I really would like to know if that's true. And this is what it would actually take to prove it to me.
Sure. And so, essentially my question here with regard to this, and this would be my question to you,
okay,
is why would someone need something on the level of omniscience in order to know that an axiom is true? You went back to 1 + 1 = 2. You can do that with 2 USB drives, but I essentially asked the question with regard to that criterion. Why is it necessary to have a single operational instance of 1 + 1 = 2 anywhere in the universe in order to show that 1 + 1 = 2? It seems that that's established on the laws of logic, which cannot be reasonably obviated. And so that therefore, it just seems that we're without reason to resort to something like that in the face of a bona fide axiom. And that seems to be what we have in the case of God's existence. We need there to be this initial parent cause of the universe, called the first domino, that sets the string of dominoes in motion. Because if the domino with your birthday written on it, let's call it the red domino, in order for that red domino to fall, there needs to be a finite number of causes behind it. You could say that red domino signifies anything. It could signify your birthday. It could signify the events of the Capitol revolt that took place in Washington, D.C. It could signify the assassination of JFK. It could signify any event in history. But it seems that there needs to be a singular cause that sets the other causes in motion minimally in order to explain why it is that the red domino collapses. And if the red domino is basically preceded by an infinite number of dominoes, then that domino never goes down, in which case today never happens. So the principle here is essentially that a universe which isn't itself triggered will itself trigger nothing within it. That's a conundrum that I don't think that we can get around. And so if that cause is necessary and sufficient to explain the rest, why shouldn't we conclude that in the face of the fact that it appears we can't conceptually erase that cause is important, whether you're talking about this world, the world of the Swiss Family Robinson, or what have you. It doesn't matter. All these sorts of conjectural worlds require this.
This is a fantastic discussion. I'm really enjoying how we're getting right into all this. This is something I've been looking forward to for years. I had no idea it would be tonight. This is great. Thank you. First of all, you're asking me, why would omniscience and omnipotence be needed to validate an axiom?
Yeah.
That would not be my purpose. My purpose is very clear. It is to prove that reliably that the deity exists. So that is my focus, and
Sure.
to call it to cut it down to an axiom kind of doesn't really. It kind of trivializes it, I think, because I'm sure that many religious people would think of their deity or deities as so much greater than a mere axiom. But the more important point is, so you're asking why. It's my criteria, because it is the omniscience and omnipotence are such fantastic and all-encompassing characteristics. I'm not really, I don't know any other way that those could be demonstrated to me without me actually being able to test drive them, so to speak, and to give them a try, to try them out. And unless there's something else that can do that, like I say, Star Trek's not real. We can't explore the universe and the cosmos and watch this stuff happen and poke and prod at it scientifically to figure it out, or skeptically to figure it out. So
sure.
Now I would like to get to the first cause, but I sense that you have something to say to this. So I go ahead if you do.
Sure.
I don't want to interrupt.
I
don't want to shotgun you.
Well, the response of Sextus Empiricus to Plato's Academy was essentially to walk them through the tropes that I identified in my opening talk. Mm-hmm. So essentially, he would, ask the academician, well, why do you think that your conclusion here is truth conducive? Yeah, this is a good way to say it. Do you think that's truth conducive? What you've done at that point is you've pressed the button and you've restarted the infinite regress. If you answer the question, then I can just simply point it back to you. Well, how do you know that that's truth conducive? Such that this could be iterated endlessly, in which case we never know whether or not what you said is true. Mm-hmm. In which case the very argument you offered has no basis. If that was insufficient to the opponent of Sextus, he would simply say, well, where there's always door number 2, you could always argue for coherentism. So you could say that you know that that's true on the basis of something you mentioned reliable. So reliabilism is we have reliable processes, et cetera, for how we come upon these things. And so what you're essentially doing, that's a coherentist argument, that we have these coherent processes that seem to furnish to us proofs. But the question which naturally becomes raised at that point is, how does that show us that we have a proper foundation for the bottom of your assertion? Do you think that that's truth conducive? If you give me an answer that's different from one of the previous answers you gave, then you've once again started the infinite regress. If you give me an answer that's the same as the ones you gave, you're just simply arguing circularly, which seems unacceptable to most people, at which point, what then is the only other alternative? It seems that it's foundationalism. So once again, if you assert what you just asserted, we could just simply say, do you think that's truth conducive? You might say something like, well, I don't need to show that it's truth conducive because it's self-evident. There you're arguing for an axiom. But my question, which immediately becomes raised, is how do you know that what you're saying is an axiom? Is it something that's based on a fundamental, self-evident, irreducible prime, some sort of law of logic that cannot be obviated, that if avoided just simply demonstrates the necessity of the thing under question, that we need laws of logic to even try to say that there's no law of logic, because that's the law of contradiction. So
I'm actually okay with saying I don't know whether something I've asked or said is axiomatic. And because in some cultures it could be, in others nobody's heard of it.
Yeah. Right. And my response here is just simply that was precisely Sextus's conclusion to the argument. We don't know which one of these three to choose from. Therefore, we're at a loss to show. But the way that I reply there is just to simply say, but Sextus, you have these three conclusions that you're talking about, and it has to be one of the three. Isn't that an axiom? Isn't it axiomatically certain that the contingent status of proposition Z, whatever that was, is either demonstrated by saying Z is proven by A prime, or Z is proven by Y, or else some other previous member of the set, or Z is proven by Z? And that seems to be axiomatically true. Therefore, axioms are reliable because they give us arguments like that.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but you highlighted that Sextus Empiricus's arguments boil down to those 3 points, which were the problem of infinite regress, the argument of coherentism, and the agreement upon foundation, the only remaining option.
Yeah.
Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's
good. My notes are correct. Okay. I made notes while you were doing your opening.
Sure.
I try to pay close attention, especially at those points. So I think where you and I are at is at number 3, where we're trying to find an agreed upon foundation, which I think takes us to your next point, where you were talking about there must be a first cause. But so I've got a few questions about that for you, because are you convinced? It seems to me that you are, that our universe has a single first cause.
Well, I think it needs a first cause, because the effect requires some kind of an explanation.
But I'm asking
the effect,
you
which
if
would
you
be
believe it has a first cause.
Yes, I do. I
Okay.
would believe that, because the first cause
Would you be willing to
can't
entertain
be airbrushed out of the
have
picture.
you ruled out the possibility of there being multiple causes that occurred at exactly the same time in initiating our universe?
Yeah, this would be a standard argument from skepticism. And skepticism essentially has a very recognizable classical form to it.
Okay.
If I know that P, I know that not Q. I don't know that not Q, therefore I don't know that P. Now, not Q would in this case be, how do I know that there are not multiple gods back there? And if I don't know that there are not multiple gods back there, then I don't know whether or not.
Oh, I wasn't asking about multiple deities. I'm asking about, for example, maybe I'll try to put it in different terms.
Okay.
Multiple, like a lot of people are saying, it's from the Big Bang. So what about the possibility of multiple Big Bangs occurring at exactly the same moment, but in different areas and converging to create our one universe? Have you been able to rule that kind of thing out? I'm assuming that you are okay with the idea of the Big Bang being the start of our universe.
Well, I mean, this would lead us down a huge rabbit hole, but
I don't mean to. I'm just trying to.
No, that's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this conversation, like this, it's a little bit more casual than a very formal debate.
Yeah.
But my confidence that the Big Bang is a right construal of the beginning of the universe is really low, because the Big Bang posits the existence of a singularity that is comprised of infinite qualities, infinite heat, infinite density. And it seems to me that infinite heat cannot become cool. Infinite density cannot be downwardly adjusted. Infinite smallness cannot increase to the size of the universe that we see around us. So I just have no confidence that these models furnish to us an explanation for why it is that the universe is expanding. Now, I don't claim to know what that is. I have no idea. But on philosophical grounds, I'm really skeptical that the Big Bang has got a good handle on things. And if we were to explore that, we would be talking about cosmology all night, and we would just get off the philosophical. So maybe that's probably not the best place to go.
I can accept that, because I'm not 100% convinced that the Big Bang or multiple bangs, because Stephen Hawking and Penrose, as I understand it, worked together and updated their theory to support multiple Big Bangs, and that's kind of why I was bringing this up. But
sure, so multiple Big Bangs.
Yeah, because of quantum physics, they had to adjust it accordingly. New evidence, as I had mentioned earlier. So that's, but I think, like I've encountered some Christians who, actually quite a few, who tell me that they believe that the Big Bang was put into motion by God to make this all happen almost automatically.
Yeah, it's a very common
Sounds like a lazy solution, which is called working smart, I think. If you can do something like that and it's reliable, why not? But this brings me to the next question then. And I think it's probably fair to assume that you believe God created the whole universe, however he's done it, Big Bang or otherwise.
However it happened, yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
So in that case, are you thinking, because you're saying that everything must have some kind of cause that triggered it, what, or do you also apply that to your God?
Yes, and again, this is...
what started your God?
Right, this is the infinitist argument. Well, if God created the world, what created God?
Your claim, and you need to provide reliable evidence of this God, and so this is why I'm asking.
Yeah, and the proof that one shouldn't just arbitrarily iterate backwards and say, well, what created that God, is because the question can be asked fairly straightforwardly of the atheist. If God created the world, then what made God? Couldn't I ask you the same question? If someone made the God that made the world, then who made that someone?
Well, you could ask me a similar question if...
and the point of a question like that, I think...
Because I do have some ideas on that. But
okay. Sure.
I have an alternative to your God, but but I'm not a scientist. I'll say that right off the bat.
Right. But there again, I think the theist would just simply respond by saying, but that's still an admission to the existence of God, because you're just suggesting a different God. It doesn't really get around the issue.
It was a deity. I didn't say it was a deity. I said it was an alternative.
Okay, sure. So it was an alternative. So if it is an alternative, if something made the God that made the world, and I would just simply say, then what made that something? It seems that something would need some sort of an origin story as well. Mm-hmm. If one is to say that everything, including a first cause, must have a cause, the very fact that
I'm not convinced that that's actually the case.
What
in reality?
What isn't the case?
That everything must have a cause.
Yeah. Well, I would say that if it's not the case that the universe has a cause, then I would say, how long has the universe been here? It certainly could not have been here for an infinite amount of time. It simply seems incoherent that there have been an infinite number of temporal seconds.
So you're saying that if the universe didn't have a cause, it couldn't be infinite? Did I hear you correctly?
No, I said, sorry.
No problem.
Yeah. The cause of the universe needs to be there, because if that's not the case, then it's just, if there's no first cause, then that immediately leads to an infinite number of causes, which means that whatever caused this moment to happen never happened, and neither did this one. And that really seems to me to pose some enormous problems.
And and one of the problems that you'll have is having to show that why the universe actually can't be infinite. Then I would think that would not be an unfair requirement to put on you.
Pardon?
If you're claiming that the universe is not infinite, like it had a beginning, then it's not infinite.
Well, I think we would know fairly certainly that if the universe were infinite, because we would see no stars in the sky. The celestial objects would have receded beyond the range of our telescopes to be able to see, because then at that point the stars would have receded so far that the distance would exceed the ability of light to travel from those distant objects to our telescopes. So the whole sky should be black.
You're making some assumptions here, I think.
I think I'm based on laws of science, aren't I? I mean, I think that most scientists would agree that we would need to have, if it were true that the universe has been expanding, why is it that we see anything at all in the sky? If it's just had an infinite amount of time to recede away from us, why do we see anything? So, I have no problem saying that the universe has a beginning.
I think you're assuming a specific point in time where all these things are going on, and as being much further back than it was in that case, when you're saying stuff like that.
Well, I mean, you're positing, an infinite universe.
And I've already pointed out that Hawking and Penrose have identified that it's because of quantum physics research advancements that it can't just be a single Big Bang. There'd be multiple Big Bangs, and they're not saying they'd all necessarily be.
Yeah, but that itself would seem to need to have a cause as well.
Okay.
That the creation of a multiverse.
I wasn't talking
also begs for the same thing as the creation of this universe.
I wasn't talking multiverses. I was talking multiple Big Bangs.
Oh, so are you talking about some sort of, membranes beating together over and over again and expanding and contracting from eternity? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, possibly. I'm talking about, we have this idea with a single Big Bang that our universe may be shaped like a sphere or an oblate spheroid, but with multiple Big Bangs, I think it'd be more likely to be shaped like a lumpy potato. And I don't mean to be funny here. It's depending on where they are.
Yeah. Right? It may be that I'm unaware of any cosmologies that require the shape of the universe to be a potato, a lumpy potato. But
if there's multiple bangs, it's going to be an irregular shape, is what I'm saying, right? Because they're going to be in different places, perhaps. Like, unless we can.
Well, it's going to be conical because the universe is expanding.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of the standard model, it comes to a hard point, which is a further most extremity, physical extremity of the space-time universe. If it's going to be the quantum gravity model, as you suggested from Hawking and Penrose, with sort of the rounded off shape that is sort of shaved away the hard edge, that would be the case of sort of interpreting one of the dimensions of space-time, that of time, as another dimension of space. But that has been shown to be just sort of, well, it hasn't been shown, it's been admitted that this is probably just a mathematical contrivance. And even Hawking himself admitted that when you take away the, sort of imaginary time, which is the mechanism used to accomplish this wonderful trick, the traditional singularities appear with point incompleteness at the beginning of the universe, sort of a lack of a surveyable geometry. So I think that, some of these things are conjecturings about what we see in terms of the scientific models in this world.
It's not totally settled. I agree with that.
It's very much is in flux. But this is an interesting thing, is that as it turns out, just on the purely philosophical sort of thought experiments I offered, it seems that you would need to have a grand parent cause of the universe, a cause that causes itself to bring the other causes into motion.
I'm willing I'm willing to grant the fact that there are people who are not convinced that the universe is actually always expanding, and it's
I don't think anyone really thinks that.
Yeah, it's hard to know, but I don't think it really is all that conducive to giving us reliable evidence for your God. And your God, which I, by the way, pointed out, is paradoxical with those characteristics of omniscience and omnipotence.
Yeah, I suppose that essentially this sounds to me like basically the discussion of early Greek philosopher Epicurus. And Epicurus essentially reasoned a set of 5 premises for an argument that concluded, therefore, God does not. If God is all powerful, he can create any world he wants. If God is all loving, he prefers a world without suffering. If an all powerful, all loving God exists, it follows that suffering does not. Suffering exists, therefore God doesn't.
There's an interesting thing. I know Pascal's wager comes up a lot too, as in those kind of discussions, and it's a very different discussion though. But
to me, that is probably the best argument for what I would call propositional atheism. Well, you use the kind of like the idea of more of a sort of lacktheism, just sort of lacking the evidence.
Well, lacktheism is a derogatory term. I don't like it. Atheism already covers it. So some people say non-theism. It's the vast majority are saying atheism, but it's the point where people are saying God really does not exist, and they're taking that actual position. Those are the anti-theist. That's the anti-identifying.
Yeah, and that would be the arguments you mentioned.
And those would be anti-theistic arguments. And for the purpose of this debate, we kind of need to get into those because I need to kind of push against your ideas and challenge them, right? So, but I am stuck at this point of this claim that this deity of yours is that you prefer is that you believe in is actually real, and this is again where sufficient evidence I think is required to demonstrate that yes, this is the real thing. And to me, what qualifies as sufficient evidence is, for myself personally, the ability to test drive those two abilities.
To test drive all of that. And to me, I guess that the difference between you and I is that I'm just simply not convinced that something that extravagant is necessary when we're talking about an axiom. Because, I think that, for example, I think it is the case that a universe is not, our universe can't really, it can't really be infinitely old. It seems to me that that's impossible. Math shows us why. And in fact, You're probably aware of this, but essentially there's been the emergence of theorems which have showed that on any universe which exists in the state of expansion eternally into the future, that none of these models can be eternal in the past, but all of them must have a start with a space-time singularity. And so that holds to be true whether you're talking about quantum loop models, quantum gravity models, whether you're talking about string theory, a variety of different elaborate proposals like these. All of these depend on the existence of a singularity at the beginning.
And
in order to explain their existence, which is another way of saying that they have to have a beginning.
And I have to reject the singularity part of it because of the update from Penrose and Hawking, which I think makes sense. There could be multiple.
But how does one know whether or not that sort of response is not just simply a matter of sheer scientific instrumentalism, having no reality in the real world? It seems like something like that is just simply a mathematical contrivance that's come up with, because I think Frank Tipler has shown that essentially it's not thought of by scientists that really space is really like, or time is really like another dimension of space. No one really believes that that's true. It's just that the equations lead to sort of a shaving off of the hard edge. So it's a matter of convenience, not a matter of reality, because if you just simply posit, well, what if space, what if time really isn't like another dimension of space?
Oh, I don't think time.
Then at that point, the singularities show up in the equations again, as Hawking admitted. And so
I'm not convinced time is a dimension. I think of it as more of just a reference point, but we have predictable things that we can use to measure what we perceive as time. So it's not physical.
Well, time is thought of as a dimension by scientists.
Oh, it's expressed as that for sure. I'm not convinced, but I'm not a scientist, like I say. So, like when I look at things like we have an expanding universe, expanding out from a singularity, one of the big questions for me that comes up is why is it that and the Andromeda galaxy is heading straight for ours instead of going away from it? If everything's expanding, does this not perhaps give some good reason to consider the possibility that Hawking and Penrose are on the right track with saying there are multiple big bangs that have created the universe?
Yeah. So the notion of there being multiple big bangs, there's a big bang per expansion phase in any of these models.
Okay.
But there is no sense in which there are events that are occurring in this universe that sort of pinch off to new ones. Hawking essentially, that was the subject of, from what I understand, a bet that Hawking had with another colleague of his, and he essentially lost the bet and saying, no, all of the information sort of stays in this universe. It doesn't go into other universes. So I don't think that that's necessarily what's being talked about by Penrose and Hawking, and sort of the shaving off of space-time into a half sphere like that.
So in order to demonstrate the rationale, the reliable evidence for your God, we need to have some reliable evidence. So you've talked about axioms and things like that, and we've had a wonderful discussion about a lot of different things, and I've enjoyed this thoroughly. But
my question though,
reliable evidence.
Yeah, my question about reliable evidence is that you say that you need to have omniscience, and my question for you is again to just sort of resort to the tropes of Sextus. Why do you think that would be truth conducive?
But I want reliable.
Well, why would that be truth conducive?
And when I asked you some things like about the people who wrote the Bible, you agreed that people are infallible and there could be mistakes with that. So, I'd like to know what is your reliable evidence for your God, something that can be relied on, or something that convinced me that I should consider some different evidence as reliable. To me, the Bible looks more like a claim or a set of claims. It's not so much as evidence to me. It's certainly evidence that this is what people thought a long time ago. I can grant that, no problem. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's what they actually witnessed. And that's the concern for me, especially from a time when literacy was kind of rare.
Yes. Well, I think that what I would say here is that, essentially I would go back to your claim that you need to have omniscience to know that God exists. And my question becomes, why would that be truth conducive as to the proving of settling the matter of God's existence as firmly probative? How does that show that?
What I said is that would definitely do it for me.
So it would do it for you. So that's not necessarily a proof of God's existence.
Well, yeah. And so this is why, we're discussing reliable evidence. So we need I'm looking to you for some reliable evidence that, and I gave you that as an example of a criteria that would definitely work for me. And I suspect that if God were to give you omniscience and omnipotence for a couple of weeks, you'd probably be delighted with that, because then you would know 100% for sure. But
I don't know. I suppose I could always ask the question, how do I know I really have omniscience? Maybe he's only given me some of it.
Yeah, exactly. But even if he could give you some of it, that enough to do what I was suggesting to do, to test out some things, that could work, right?
Yeah.
Get down to perception of reality again here in this case.
Yeah, I mean, how much information would lead me to the conclusion that I have omniscience? I'm not sure that I would be able to say in myself whether I have all the information necessary to show this. And, essentially, as it relates to the issue of Christianity, and I think, I don't know if James is, wanting to sort of pivot at this point, but I think that when it comes to the claims of Christianity and becoming a Christian, here, the evidence that leads a person to become a Christian is not just simply evidence that God is real. That's not going to do it for anybody. It's not just simply the claim that we have this great book. Mm-hmm. It's because a man named Jesus of Nazareth went around the ancient world performing miracles and exorcisms, raising up basically messianic expectations almost everywhere he went, and then claimed that he was going to the cross to die for the sin of the world, that he was dying an atoning death. And that, for me, and I think probably for any Christian that's watching this, becomes the principal reason as to why I commit my life to Christ and become a Christian. But that isn't something that comes to me on the basis of just simply apprising whether or not it's true that God exists. That's certainly part of it. That's constituent to the broader inquiry, but it is not the linchpin. The linchpin becomes the cross. And so as these questions that I have that I struggle with become answered, it's almost as though these obstacles to my standing and sort of clear view of the cross become removed. And suddenly I can see the face of this man who says he died for me. And that's what turns me into a Christian. That's what turns all of us into Christians, I think. So
the sacrifice appeals to you. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah.
I think that dying for somebody else's wrongdoings is unethical. I consider that's vicarious redemption. I have a big problem with that. But that's of course not the topic here. But it's
right.
It's good to know that that's what you believe. You're clear on it, and I respect that, and I have no problem with that. Again, trying to get back to the topic, or James, did you want to move on to another segment here? I don't. I can tell you, I don't feel like I've seen reliable evidence. That's just. But I'm sure you're not surprised by that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, we are stoked, folks, to jump into your questions. We appreciate them. We appreciate both of our guests. They're linked in the description, folks. So if you want to hear more, hey, what are you waiting for? You can right now. By the way, you must have, Ben, don't worry. Good things to say about you, Randolph. Don't worry, they're coming up. But I have to say,
and with utmost respect, I want to say thank you to Ben for all his patience and this wonderful, cordial conversation. This was so enjoyable.
Absolutely. And we're starting our questions or comments off. This is a super chat from Stupid Horror Energy. Appreciate it. It says, Ben looks a little like Ray Liotta. Do you ever get that, Ben? You kind of do, especially in the eyes.
I've never heard a comparison to Ray Liotta.
So, definitely, I think it's true. It's like the hunter eyes. But
Okay.
also, we had somebody in the Twitch chat as
No, I think
folks.
Ben looks much happier than Ray Liotta. I just looked him up.
We do have Twitch folks, and somebody in the Twitch chat also said you sound like Nick Cage. Have you ever heard that, Ben?
Nicholas, no.
Wow. So you got showbiz written all over you. The Sultan of Swag, we shall call you. So thank you very much.
I would say Nicolas Cage with a little bit of Ronald Reagan mixed into the voice, and I think that might nail it.
Very nice. And also, this one's from Everyday Valet, says, hey man, can you please give me the testable evidence? Well, we'll see, Everyday Valet, this is early in the debate, so we'll see. Let us know in the chat if you were pleased with the testable evidence you were asking for, if you were pleased with Ben's, or I should say, Ben's response. Anna Gruber, thank you for your super chat, said, lost me a Z prime. I don't know what that means. You guys?
Oh, he's referring to something Ben said in his opening statement about the
yes,
about,
very good.
Sextus Empiricus.
Mm-hmm. So if we have a proposition, call it Proposition A. Skepticism says that proposition is contingent upon our conferring evidence upon it to show that it's indeed true. We don't know if it's a true proposition yet. So how do we prove A? Well, presumably by B. B is proven by C, so on and so forth until you get to Z. But now you've just sort of, you scratch your head and you say to yourself, well, now that we're at Z, what do we do? And of course, this is a thought experiment. That's all that Sextus ever claimed it was. And he just simply said, well, you could, on infinitism, argue that what you need to do to show that the contingent status of proposition Z is settled, whatever that is, then you can say, well, it's proven by proposition A prime. And you just simply iterate the inquiry further back. Well, how is A prime proven? B prime. How is B prime proven? C prime, and so on and so forth until you get to Z prime. But once again, you're kind of stuck with the same question. Well, how do we go from here? And so what it shows is that there appears to be no proper stopping mechanism on the argument of infinitism, which essentially is invoking the rule of independence. You need something other than A itself to show that A is valid. And then, of course, the other two tropes in the experiment were a way of showing, well, there's other ways to do this if you don't think that that's satisfactory, because what that winds up amounting to is that A is really never proven. And that's a very sad thing if that's true.
Gotcha. And Jay
I'm not convinced it is.
I think I'm going to be looking into Sextus Empiricus after this. Sounds interesting.
You got it.
Sure.
Jay Mixon, appreciate your super chat, said, it's an error to assume all options have been exhausted just because we reached the limits of human knowledge.
I agree.
Ben, what do you think?
It's arrogant to assume that we have reached the limits of human knowledge?
No, they said it's an error to assume all options have been exhausted just because we reached the limits of human knowledge. In other words, you're saying like even if we reach the limits of human knowledge, we should not assume that all options have been exhausted.
Sure. Yeah, and because there could be some sort of hypothetical other thing you've not yet considered.
And not necessarily hypothetical. It could be real, and we just haven't discovered it yet. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would certainly grant that, and I'm assuming that here the questioner has in mind the notion of science, that we're always reasoning forward and sort of groping forward in the dark, and that there could always be something else out there. That's sort of akin to this infinite regress that we've been discussing. And the thing is that how does that show that we have a foundation for human knowledge? And Sextus talked about the other two possibilities, coherentism and foundationalism. And I think I've pointed out that essentially the reason why I think that doesn't lead to a knowledge stalemate is because in the family of arguments that would naturally be, fall into the species of foundationalism is axiomatic arguments. And to me, we're just never justified in questioning whether things like mathematical propositions are somehow false, like A plus B is equal to B plus A. No, that's false.
You got it. And
it's just unimaginable to me.
thank you for your question. This one comes in from Everyday Valet. Says, if God is real, he should be able to show himself to be a fact. This is madness, LOL. I think they're saying it's madness that God, if he is real, hasn't shown himself to be a fact.
Yeah. Well, to me, is it factual to say that 1 + 1 = 2? No, and that's just an axiom. And I, as I've already mentioned in our discussion, why on earth would we need an operational instance of this happening anywhere in the universe to know that solution is true? So why does the fact need to manifest in a physical way in order for us to know that it's real? There we get into all kinds of problems philosophically in the area of epistemology. That's a massive train wreck in that direction, and it leads to the collapse of a lot of other important principles for evaluating true propositions.
See, I think when it comes down to sufficiency, that the criteria changes depending on what it is that we're trying to demonstrate. As I said earlier, we can easily and trivially demonstrate 1 + 1 = 2. But for somebody to demonstrate that they know that a certain number is prime that has 100,000 digits, that's going to take a lot more work. There's going to be a greater sufficiency for that. So depending on what it is, how sophisticated it is, or how powerful it is, or how what's involved in there, there's a sufficiency aspect here that needs to be considered.
I'm now remembering the question that I had with regard to this issue. Are you saying that you have sufficient confidence that 1 + 1 = 2 because you can do it in the physical world and see it? And is that the only reason you're confident? Or are you confident because the laws of logic dictate that it must be true? Isn't that a fact? Does that fall under the fact family?
First, in the same way that then we must go to the next question.
First of all, the problem with that question is that it attempts to limit the scope of my answers. There are a number of different factors involved in that. And so when it comes to a trivial thing, there's lots of different things that I can say are sufficient for demonstrating that. And for practical purposes, I don't really need a heck of a lot. But when it comes to fixing the engine in a car, or putting up or designing the frame for part of my house or something, there's a lot more I need to know in order to have confidence in the fact that I'm doing it properly. So the sufficiency changes depending on the complexity and depending on how much knowledge I have about it.
Okay.
You got it. And thank you very much for your question coming in. Or you could say Everyday Valet says, you could tack this on to their last. He said, it may be stupid, but I'm not understanding where the evidence for God is. Well, maybe they've changed their mind since. That was in the early part of the debate. But Jay Mixon, thank you for your question. This is for Randolph. Finally, we got one for you, Randolph. He said, we don't assert a God, therefore we don't have to prove him. Theists, what they're doing is they're paraphrasing each side. So they're saying basically that atheists say, quote, we don't assert a God, therefore we don't have to prove him. And they say that theists in response say, God is axiomatic, so we don't have to prove him. So then they say God says ... I'm confused.
You need to say that in Stephen Colbert imitating Trump voice. ... He says it really well. The way that's phrased, it almost sounds like it's a special case just for atheists, and I don't think that's what they meant, but I just want to make it clear that that's not what it meant. We have anybody who's not making a claim isn't carrying any kind of a burden. So as soon as somebody makes a claim about anything, if you want to convince somebody else who's not convinced, then of course you have an onus of justification or a burden of proof on that. That's just standard. That's just how it works. So that the same goes for proving something is real or proving something isn't real. If you're making a claim about something in reality, then you obviously have some kind of a burden to somehow demonstrate that's true or to prove its veracity or something like that. So yeah, anybody making any kind of claim, somebody who's not taking a position on whether the Marklar on planet Marklar are real, doesn't carry any burden of proof there.
Gotcha. And thank you for your question. This one comes in from Cider and Port. Appreciate it. It says, me and Leo versus CJ and Smokey on socialism versus capitalism could be a very juicy debate if you would host us. I'm open to that. That could be juicy indeed. So shoot me an email. Appreciate it. And Amy Newman, thank you for your super chat, says, after show, midnight. And she linked it and says, Ben, is there a reason for why you became, I think you could say maybe, is there a main reason for why you became a theist and specifically a Christian? And by the way, Amy Newman's after show is linked in the description, folks. But Ben, go ahead on that question.
Well, my personal testimony is that I feel that I had what I would call a God encounter on a college campus in Springfield, Missouri. And there happened to be some revival services that were happening on the college campus. And there was an evangelist by the name of Sam Farina that preached and was moving the hearts of many of those young people in that auditorium to give their life to Jesus. And I didn't go up for the altar call, but I did have an altar call of my own. Well, I guess you could say it that way, out in the grassy commons of the college campus. It was a pretty clear fall night. And I can remember being impressed with the sensation that I wasn't alone in that field. And so there was a very real thing that happened there. And that is something that I've always carried with me. That presence really hasn't left me throughout all of my Christian life since. It's been over 20 years now, and that's never left me. So,
gotcha. Thank you very much. And thank you for your question. This one is coming in from, okay, not reading that. Okay, Oz. Let's see. Oz says, great conversation. Randolph for the win. And so you had a fan out there, Randolph. We also had one that was arguing on behalf of Ben, claiming victory, but something I'm just not going to read in public. Zirafa, we've got some sick individuals, but Zirafa, thank you for your question. Says, Ben Fischer, is there a logically coherent explanatory hypothesis of possible mechanisms of purely immaterial atemporal causation?
Atemporal?
Correct.
Causation?
Not temporal.
Well, I would say that I think that this might be sort of a nod to our current understanding of space, and in particular particle physics, and empty space, the science of empty space. Now, I'm a little bit rusty on some of this material, but I think that if memory serves right, it seems that those particles in that physical space, according to modern science, have a beginning. And so therefore, it isn't the case that this rules out the possibility of causality. So I think that I don't think that quantum mechanics furnishes us a proof of this concept. Perhaps that's not what the questioner was referring to, so I did the best I could to try to interpret what they were going after.
You bet.
Awesome observation, though.
And thank you for your question. This one coming in from Oz, who says, question for Randolph. Are you grateful that Ben's camera view is from shoulders up compared to your last debate? I think that we'll let Randolph tell the story.
Oh, I know what he's referring to. I was just debating 10 Commandments 2 days ago, and my interlocutor, it turns out he wasn't wearing pants through the whole thing. I just assumed he's wearing pants that match his skin color. And I didn't see it, probably because I was looking at my notes and listening to what's being said. Apparently, near the end of it, he stood up and walked all the way around in his room, and people could see a lot more than what they had bargained for. So,
Well.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be debating with him again. And I feel sorry for the Atheist Roundtable having to endure that, because they've been nothing but kind and professional to everybody. It's just...
Randolph, rest assured, I'm wearing pants.
I believe you. I have no reason not to. I have a high level of confidence in that.
That's really
even as a
considerate.
skeptic. Well, I'm not a skeptic. I'm trying to be one.
Okay.
Yes,
That's a
very-
great line. I think I'll quote you. I'm not
Okay.
a skeptic. I'm trying to be one.
Yeah, I'm striving to be one. Yeah.
Thank you very
Feel free.
much. And let's see. This one comes in from 100th Monkey, says Modern Day Debate rocks. Thanks for your encouragement, friend. We're excited about 2021, you guys. This debate is one of many more epic debates to come. We're excited for it. And so Oz also says Randolph is Canada's God. Wow, this is a new religion and everything, Randolph.
Oh, Ben, do you want to take this one first?
No, I don't think that that Randolph would argue that he has existed from eternity. So I don't know that we can have a good grounds for saying that Randolph is God.
Oh yeah, I am not a god. No,
Okay. End of story. Yeah.
But yeah, I am not.
And Human Girl, thanks for your super chat. Said thanks for your channel, James. Well, I want to pass on that thank you. We appreciate the thank you for sure, Human Girl, and also want to pass on the thank you to the debaters who are the lifeblood of the channel. And so that's why you guys, their links are in the description right this moment. So you can go down there, just click right in there, and you are at their links, as we really do appreciate these guys. And if you guys want, you guys are the kind of guys that this is theoretical. Like it's just like we're just kind of feeling out, kind of trying to find out where people are. We want to do a lot of in-person debates this summer, and both of you guys are kind of like the caliber of speakers that we'd enjoy. And so if you guys, depending on your location, it's not a guarantee, but like, hey, like you guys are the kind of guys that like, let's talk, let me know where you guys live. If you want to do an in-person kind of event, we'd love to have you. And so Cider in Port, thank you for your question, says, hey James, I'll shoot an email to Smokey, trying to set it up. Happy you'll have us, be glad to be back on in a while. Thank you, Cider in Port, who I think is a fellow. Oh wait,
just to answer your question, I'm in the Greater Vancouver area of British Columbia, Canada.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
The Vancouver.
And I'm in Minnesota.
Yep.
Oh, that's right, Ben. Yes, okay. St. Paul, right?
So yeah, the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. That's where I live.
Gotcha. Okay, because I used to live in Minnesota myself. You guys, both of you guys, gentlemen, you guys are both tough as nails because both of your locations, I imagine, right now are so cold.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it is getting colder here. I had to stop walking around outside in sandals just 2 days ago because it's starting to get a bit too cold for that.
Really, I believe it. And so
I grew up here, so I'm kind of used to the colder climate anyway. But people who aren't from here find it. You're wearing sandals on a day like today. It's so cold.
Yes, that is, it's impressive. It's a bold strategy. And Jay Mixon, thanks for says, you could say compliment. They said, I was going to thank Randolph for his personable and amicable demeanor. Let's see, but I found out he's Canadian. That's an unfair advantage. That's right. The Canadians are friendly. We found that they're always friendly. It's like there's something in the water up there. I don't know.
I have to say to Jay Mixon, I'm very sorry about that. I couldn't help it.
That's funny. And also Cider in Port said, I definitely recognize you, Cider in Port. I know that you are formerly known as Religion is BS, and now the new name Cider in Port. I definitely recognize you, buddy. And so Oz, thanks for your super chat, said Friday is going to be awesome. Dr. Josh is that boss. Yes, it is going to be epic, folks. On the bottom right of your screen, you are seeing Biblical Slavery Debate this Friday with Matt Dillahunty. That's right. It was, Ben, you had a good one with him I think it was over the summer, maybe. That was fun. And so they'll be on this Friday. That'll be against, like I said, the father-son duo, Cliff and Stewart. So that should be a fun one, folks. Don't miss it. And next in, let's see. Iron Charioteer, thanks for your question, said, for Ben, how does he go about telling a drug addict that he or she will have no drugs in heaven? I think they're serious, though.
There'll be no drugs in heaven?
Yeah.
I don't think the call to not use substances that I think would be just proper to Christian sanctification does not necessarily imply that God is against having altered states of consciousness.
Nice answer.
So I don't at all think that that we're not going to have extreme elation at the level that one could rightly say, hey, that looks like that dude's on drugs in heaven. Sure, you can quote me on that.
So in heaven you could have like the poppy fields to the west and the mushrooms.
No, I'm saying that there's a thrill in heaven that's way bigger than that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's way bigger than that, and I think it would have to qualify as an altered state of conscience.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Lightning 20 says, Ben, how do you distinguish between the Christian God causing the universe versus the thousands of other gods proposed by other religions? Why is a thinking agent necessary?
Why is a thinking agent necessary? Here, I would just simply go back to, if the reason that the parent cause of the universe causes the other causes to be set in motion, is something outside of itself, then that other thing and not itself is the parent cause of the universe. Does that make sense? So therefore, the reason why the parent cause causes the other causes to be set in motion is itself and not another. So it causes itself, which implies personal agency, and that directly implies a person. So it's easy to kind of reason your way back there to get to that. It's not, in my opinion, that is not gymnastics, mental gymnastics. I think it's really sound. So
I also think that omniscience and omnipotence, to be useful together, would require that.
You got it. And thank you very much for your question. This one coming in from Ryan Price says, question for Ben, if you have reliable evidence for God, doesn't that mean you don't have faith anymore? You can't have faith in something you already have reliable evidence for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is really, I think one has to understand that the Christian, when he says, I am a theist, is not saying that he is in the position of having the psychological condition of believing that God exists. He is saying that he knows that God in fact exists. In other words, theism is a knowledge claim.
No.
And essentially that, you can look to the Christian scriptures and you can see that that's true. That the discussion on the knowledge of God proliferates the book of Proverbs, and not just that book, but other books as well. So the Christian is definitely claiming, I think, that he knows that God exists. Now, whether or not that means he has a good argument for God's existence is entirely immaterial. The point still stands that the Christian's knowledge of God is knowledge in the proper sense, from everything we know about theology.
So my understanding is the word theism actually is about belief in deities, and the word Gnosticism covers knowledge of the mystical, such as deities. So there would be but a lot of people who believe also feel that they know, and I think that's
Paul Draper. Paul Draper has pointed out, and you can see this in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, his wonderful article on atheism points out that theism is a knowledge claim that God in fact exists, which is his reason for asserting that atheism should also be construed as a knowledge claim that God does not exist, because it's essentially derived from theism.
That's not how I read that article, and I do have some problems with that article, but that can be a conversation for another day. Yeah.
There's most things, as is the case in virtually every philosophical discussion, are quote unquote debatable. But
it wouldn't be philosophy if there wasn't dissension.
Next up, Top Dog Shattuck, appreciate your question. This one's for Ben. They say, where do theists get the information of an intelligent designer in real life instead of just nature and the observed?
I'm not sure that I understand what the question is asking.
I kind of think they're asking, if I were to put it in my own words, I think they're kind of saying, why do you get the idea that there's an intelligent designer rather than it just being not an intelligent designer? Yeah, I think that what you could go to, because, if you're going to fault sort of a not so intelligent designer, aren't you still essentially conceding to the point that the first cause argument, as I've described it, shows that God exists? And so again, I would just say that would be a strange position for an atheist to assume.
But I think that if you were to look at the appearance of nature, what's called the teleological argument, the argument from the perfect order of creation, it would be a strange thing for the type of order that we have seen in the universe to come together just simply by random processes alone, just sort of random stochastic processes bringing about all of this. That's a hard one, I think, even for some scientists to swallow.
Well,
So,
just to be clear, I'm not aware of very many atheists who claim it's random. It's just how things work in our universe in reality.
right. And there the argument is from necessity as opposed to the mechanism of chance. But I don't find that alternative to be persuasive either.
Sure. And then with atheism, it's not like a lot of time people are thinking, oh, atheists need to answer scientific questions since they're not answering a religious question. But no, we don't. If we're scientists and we're interested in answering those questions, sure. If you're posing the question to a scientist, then that makes sense.
And I would agree with that.
Gotcha. And thank you for your question. I think we are pretty much caught up. I could have sworn this is an interesting. We just had this one come in. Appreciate it. This one coming in from Bali Nax says, question for Randolph, is Canada more or less religious than America?
Oh, we're definitely less religious, but there still are a lot of people here following religions. And there's, I think we have a lot more variety and diversity in the different religions that people follow here. And the thing, though, it can be a little deceiving because culturally, a lot of religious and non-religious people are basically a lot of theists and atheists here don't publicly declare it everywhere we go. It's generally here thought of more as a private thing. So you might see people with a little bit of religious symbolism here and there, but it would, like when I look at what's going on in the U.S. and you see people make a big deal of it, we don't see nearly as much of that here.
Gotcha. And with that, a couple things up front, folks, or you could say at the tail end. One, you guys, most importantly, our guests are linked in the description, so check those links out. We appreciate these guys. Also, if you like podcasts, well, hey, our podcast is out there. It's just like YouTube. It's just open for the public. If you can't find us in your favorite podcast app, let me know. We will work to get on there. So pull out your phone right now. See if we're on your favorite podcast app because we want to be sure that we are. And hopefully that's of value to you. It's cool thinking that many more people will hear this debate, not only on YouTube, but then our podcast is picking up momentum. And so we also put the guest links in the podcast description now as well. So if you're listening by podcast, you can also get to Ben or Randolph's link by clicking on those links in the description. So thank you guys. It's been a true pleasure, Randolph and Ben. We really do appreciate you guys being with us.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
With that, folks,
Nice to meet you too, Ben.
Nice to meet you.
This has been such a cordial debate. I had a feeling it's like these guys are so cordial. It's going to be a tremendous debate. We just appreciate that it's like people get. It's not a WWE Jerry Springer type of thing. So we appreciate you guys, and so an extra thank you guys. And so with that, folks, keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. I will be back in just a moment with a kind of an after. A post-credits scene, which is just be a quick channel update on upcoming debates and stuff like that. So with that, thank you, though, everybody. Keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. and gentlemen, that was epic. I loved that. That was super. I love that it was an exchange of ideas. It was super cordial. It was super charitable. And I just appreciate these guys so much. They're linked in the description, folks. So, hey, you can hear plenty more where that came from. We really do appreciate both Randolph and Ben. And so we are stoked as well, you guys, for this Friday. But first, let me just say I appreciate you guys hanging out here. So let me say hello, seeing you guys in the chat. It's nice to just, thanks Jamie Russell for your supportive super chat, who said, this is a super chat proof of the Matrix. James may be a GPT-3 avatar beta version. Love you, bro. Keep it up. Well, love you too. Appreciate it, Jamie. Seriously, it means a lot. It's encouraging. I'm excited about the future, you guys. We're excited about the debates we want to host, a lot of which, there's no guarantee. We'll see. We'll play it by ear. But we'd like to, this summer, do a lot of in-person debates, like modern day debate on tour. And so that could be really fun. And so that's what we're hoping for. That's one of the big things we want to do a lot more of as it's been a while already. It's been almost a year since our last one. The very last one we had, it's funny, that was with Matt Dillahunty and David Wood. And I appreciate so much that those guys were willing to do it, because that was just as news was breaking that COVID was happening. So they carried through with it though. And so that was our most recent in-person one. But Manic Panda, is good to see you as well. Henry Hansen, see you there. What? I see you there. Otangelo, as always. Matthew Steele, good to see you. It's been a while. I really hope you're doing well. And Maya Adkisson, thank you for your kind words. Said great show. Thanks. Appreciate that, Maya. Thank you for being with us. And Master Optics, good to see you, as well as Jay Mixon. Thanks for your hearts there, your shining hearts, and your support. Boogarty says hello back, friend. Timo, thanks for sharing. We do. Timo put it in the chat, and I'm going to pin it to the top of the chat. We do have a Patreon, so if you didn't know that, hey, it's pinned to the top of the chat, so it's convenient if you want to check that out. I think we've got 3 tiers, as they call them. And so, yeah, we are pumped about that. And then, as you'll see on the screen, maybe you're like, I'm not really into Patreon. Like, that per se isn't what I'm looking for. Another thing is, it was like months we didn't have it working. We have our PayPal for the channel is working again. So that link is in the description. And so if you guys want to support us, it's just like a one-time deal. You don't want to do a monthly commitment, like totally cool too. And bottom right of your screen, you are seeing Is Bigfoot Real is this Saturday. You guys, that's going to be epic. I honestly just get a kick out of those topics. That's seriously fun stuff. So that'll be a fun debate. Human Girl says LOL, but not at Bigfoot. And Amy Newman, thanks for your heart as well. And thank you so much. Seeing you guys in the chat. Martin Pfefferly, thanks for being here with us. Chaos Theory, good to see you again. You've been here many a days. And good day to you, sir, as well. Thanks for being with us. And let's see. Argatha and Bollinax, good to see you as always. Randolph, good to see you. He says, hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this conversation/debate. And I'm pinning that to the top of the chat, as we appreciate that, Randolph. Thanks for your positivity. And Colin Lorenz says, got another Twitch debater who says they'd be interested. I sent him the Discord link. Thank you, Colin Lorenz. That would be rad. I am open to it, depending on what the topic is. But yeah, I appreciate that. And let's see. We have... Yes, good day to you, sir, says, is that debate real? Oh, it is real. I'm dead serious. Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, who you were seeing pictured on the left there. This guy's like, someone in chat earlier said it. When I announced it the first time, a lot of times I've mentioned him. People are like, I know who that is. Like, I discovered him. I was watching a Netflix, or no, not Netflix, Amazon Prime. I was watching a documentary about Bigfoot, and he was in it. He's an professor at Idaho State University, and basically he was being interviewed, and I was like, this guy is really articulate. Like, this would be really fun if we could get him to come on for a debate. So we are thrilled to have him come on. He has a book that's linked in the description for that video, by the way, folks. And sometimes I think you guys are like, oh, people are trying to sell books. I would say some of you, not a lot of you, but a small percentage of you sometimes are like, oh, they're trying to sell a book, huh? And it's like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with like trying to get your book out there so that people know about it. Like, if you think it's positively impacting the world, of course. And so he didn't even ask me to he didn't even mention the book. I found it on my own and put it in the description. So want to let you guys know about that. We're pumped to have him on. It's really gracious of him to give his time, because he's just like, sure, I'll come on. And so he'll be debating newcomer Maddie. She's a PhD student, and so she is in the sciences as well. Jay Mixon says, James, we have to bring more mythicists or semi-mythicists on. A lot of these guys speak about Christ with great assurity. We are actually, I reached out to David Fitzgerald about a possible debate at the end of this month. So that may happen. Cider and Port says, are you coming to tour Ireland? No joke, I do actually. There are a lot of people. It's a tough one, Cider and Port. I've been to Ireland. I loved it. I was in Dublin, not surprisingly, because Dublin's maybe, I would think, one of the best spots to see. I loved it. Beautiful city. There on the river, and I'm trying to remember what the name of the river is though. But it was amazing. And then I got to see the epic library that I had been wanting to see for so long. I think it's been a long day. Is that at Trinity, basically like the Harvard of Ireland, basically that, as well as, of course, the great treasure within the library. And so, yeah, anyway, long story short, maybe Ireland, it's a possibility, though there's a huge concentration of debaters down in London. There's a ton of them. So it's not impossible. But Randolph Richardson says, Elijah Antunes, if you want to get in a debate, contact Modern Day Debate. He'll make arrangements with you. Yes, we are open. We do ask for a few things. Usually, like, prior debate experience is a big one. Is debate experience, if you have a link of it, let's say. Also, it's not necessary. It depends on the topic. Some topics I just don't know if they fit our style, so I can't guarantee that we'd want it, but it depends. And Randolph said, fun fact, it's illegal to kill Sasquatch in British Columbia, Canada. This province only, though. Oh, that's funny. So don't kill Bigfoot if you live there. And yes, we are pumped, though, you guys, as we have a lot coming up. In fact, next month, let me show you this poster if you haven't seen it yet. I'm pumped for this. Doug Wilson, one of the, you could say, kind of the half of the stars of the documentary Collision with Christopher Hitchens. Doug Wilson will be on, and so you could say an old friend of Christopher Hitchens. He's pictured at the left in the poster that you're seeing on screen for the upcoming debate, Pastor versus Professor. And Ben Burgess, who is a professor in philosophy, will be debating him on whether or not atheism is immoral. So get ready to be triggered, folks. There's going to be a lot of triggering. And Cider and Port says, Trinity College, yeah, massive library, yeah. Come to Ireland, I'd be so stoked to do an in-person one. Thank you, Cider and Port. We appreciate that. And, oh my gosh, if I could get to see Ireland again, it was absolutely beautiful. And I didn't even get to see that much because I was finishing up my paper. But sometimes things just drag on. The paper, not Ireland. I wish Ireland would drag on. Amy Newman says, it's skeptic-themed channel, but we welcome all views, atheists or theists. And yeah, he seemed like a really nice guy. Are you talking about us? We do welcome everybody. I would say we don't even have a theme for the channel because we're like, that's the thing, folks. We're like a buffet. We got science, religion, politics. We're a pretty dynamic channel. And frankly, a lot of people would say that it goes against quote unquote best practice of YouTube. But we do like the variety. And so, yeah, I think that we're really we're stoked to hopefully welcome people who are just big on ideas. They're like, hey, I love politics. I love religion debates. I love science debates. Like all those things, I can find a lot of stuff interesting in all of those categories. You're what we would in psychology would say you're probably high on the personality trait of openness, big on ideas, big on new ideas. You want to hear them and think about them. So yes, you're kind of like the if you enjoy this channel, you're kind of like the Athenians, who they told the Apostle Paul, they said, hey, like, what's this guy talking about? Bring him up to the Areopagus. Let's hear what he has to say. They're big on ideas. And so Randolph Richardson says, Douglas Wilson is also famous for debating with Christopher Hitchens on a number of occasions. I'm glad you're getting him on. He seems like a nice guy. That should be an epic one, you guys. I'm pumped for it. I still haven't watched that documentary. I feel like a knucklehead because I think it's out there public now. The documentary between Christopher Hitchens and Pastor Doug Wilson, who you're seeing on the bottom left of your screen, that I think is, if you Google it, you should be able to find a free copy of it. They released it, I think, to the public now. So it's like a public film for everybody to enjoy. You don't have to pay a dime. And so that's the impression I get. That's how I understood it when I read about it. And so, yes, that documentary, I'm stoked. I'm going to watch that probably in the next week, maybe. And so, but I got Disney Plus, so it's like I'm watching Endgame. I don't want to stop, but I do appreciate you guys hanging out here. Amy Newman, good to see you as always. And so, yeah, we do appreciate. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Please let me know, is there something that I can do to make your day easier? Is there something that I can do that you're like, hey, yeah, actually there is. Like, shoot me an email at moderndaydebate@gmail.com. That's my actual email. No spaces or hyphens. It's just moderndaydebate@gmail.com. And so, yeah, like come check us out, like, or come say hello and let me know. I do want to support in the same way that you guys encourage me and are just super supportive of me. I appreciate it so much. This makes my day when I get to do this. I always tell the debaters before we start, I'm like, you guys have no, it just puts me in such a great mood. I'm excited. And so I love doing this, you guys, and I love hanging out with you guys. Jared, good to see you. It's been a long time. A lot of you guys don't know. So one of my debates was with Jared. I forget to mention, because a lot of times I mention like past debates, and like one or two of them like in person that I did, that I've like re-uploaded onto Modern Day Debate as like a throwback Thursday thing. But I also, Jared and I had a fun debate. I really do appreciate Jared. He's like a friendly guy. Jared, I hope you're doing well, buddy. And I'm glad you said hello or came by. That has to be the same Jared I remember. I think it was like the same YouTube account that like he left a comment on a non sequitur show where I went on there for a debate. Who's that? I think that was against, what's the name of, they say he has a beautiful beard, and he does. But he's got the static face. I can't remember. I should know this. But I debated him. And then in the comments I said, hey, Jared, let's debate. Now, Wavy Davy Gaming says, I see a demon right now. Heads up, Wavy Davy. But Randolph Richardson says, if you ever want to come to Vancouver, let me know beforehand, and bring your hiking boots, because we have some great forests here. I believe that. I definitely would love to see it. I appreciate that, Randolph. And I've only seen a little bit of Canada. It was the Toronto area, but I did love it. It was really fun. People were kind. I appreciated that. And Sodium AI 314 says, he is here debating. Appreciate that, friend. Glad you're here. And so, I would say I've got heart palpitations because I'm trying out the keto diet. I'm serious. I feel pretty good. I do feel like I'm in a good mood. My heart palpitations, though, are sometimes so big. Today I had one that made me cough. I don't know if it's like I'm starting to get to the point where I'm like, this is normal. But we're going to make it. So want to say thanks, everybody, for being here, though. We are excited. Other debates coming up. We've got another one booked for, let me see. I like telling you guys like the secret debates coming up that we haven't put we haven't put the event up yet, but they're booked in the sense that like over email people have committed to doing them. And so let me tell you about any of the other ones, because we have thanks for your patience. We have another one on the very same week. Oh, I think it's Tony. If I remember right, Tony Reed will be back. We haven't had him for a while, so that would be cool. I think it'll be against a newcomer that he had found. And and then at the end of the month, on the 30th, we have a brand new Flat Earth fellow, named Effed Up a World. Edgy. So he'll be on. Oh yeah, Jay Mixon, you got it right. Prophet of Zod. That was who I had a friendly debate with a long time ago. Oz is right. I lost over 100 pounds on keto. Look at my face, you guys. Really thin face. But I'm doing all right. Michelle Louise Davis says, "Hi, I'm banned." Well, I'm afraid on this particular day you are not banned and you are wrong. Well, I'm not, like, I remember you emailed me, you were like, "Hey, I'm banned." And I was like, "I'll try to see what I can do." I told you I took you out of the ban list. You think I'm making this up? But St. Nick, thanks for being with us. Glad you are here. We appreciate it. Randolph Richardson says, "I have to head off to dinner. Take care, and thanks again for everything." Thank you, Randolph. It's always fun. This is honestly a pleasure for me. And so, someone said the Q word in the chat. Can't say that. I can't say that on air for real, otherwise it's bad. YouTube notices that word more than any other word. But yes, we do have, if you want reminders via Twitter, we are on Twitter, and so we post out almost all of our debates. Sometimes I get really busy and I get behind, but otherwise we usually tweet out our debate every day that we have one in the morning. And so hopefully if you're following us on Twitter, that's useful. I don't know. We get like, I don't know. We don't get a ton of engagement on Twitter, but it's hard. It's hard for me to like hang out all over. Like, I'm still trying to learn Discord. I'm frankly still trying to learn Twitter, but Argatha, good to see you, friend. Glad you were here. But yeah, want to say appreciate you guys. Let me know. I just, I'm having a good old time. I'm going to wish you well. I hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday or Thursday, depending on where you are. Appreciate you guys. Love you guys. Thanks for all of your support. Thank you for everything. Seriously, I'm excited about what's going on. Brian Stevens, good to see you, man. Better late than never. But yeah, stoked to see you. But yeah, I'm excited about the future, you guys, and I appreciate you guys. You have honestly just, the more the merrier. It makes this channel fun, and so appreciate you guys. I hope you have a great night or day. Keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable, everybody. Take care.